While it's not compulsory to own a rear pit stand when cleaning or adjusting the chain in a modern sport bike, it certainly is something you probably won't want to go without, especially once you get used to it. For the little amount of money these things do cost, they're a worthwhile investment to have in your garage. Before we can make any adjustments to the chain on the SP2, we firstly need to loosen off the 32mm locking nut that holds the rear axle in its place. The nut itself does not need to come off. It only needs to be loosened about 3/4 of a turn, enough to make the rear axle loose enough so it can slide up and down through the adjustment area. Here you'll notice a 12mm nut. This runs along the thread of the 10mm adjustment bolt to adjust the chain. The next step to allow the 10mm adjustment bolts to freely move and adjust the chain is to loosen off the 12mm locking nuts. This is repeated on both sides. Here you see the chain in a very, very loose setting. To adjust this chain, we're going to start by winding the adjustment bolt outwards, therefore anti-clockwise, to tighten the chain up. Remember to start all adjustments from the left-hand side, that being the pivoting area of the rear axle. Here you will notice as the 10mm adjustment bolt is wound out, the whole chain assembly tightens up. And of course, as the adjustment bolt is wound back in again, the chain assembly loosens off. Here in this shot you can see the 6 markings on the side of the swing arm. These are the measurement points that the centre line of the rear axle is adjusted to. And here on the adjustment block you will notice a little point. This represents the centre line of the rear axle. The next step is to adjust the chain using the 10mm adjustment bolt. Most 520 and 530 sport bike chains require a free play measurement of around 25 to 35mm. Adjust both sides so the markings on the side of the swing arm align to the marking on the centre line of the rear axle evenly. For the first couple of times when adjusting a chain, to get a feel for it, you may want to use a rule or a small tape measure to get an idea of how much free play you do have. After a while, the more simplified method will actually do. If you're as fussy as I am as far as chain adjustment on both sides of the swing arm to make sure that it's equal and correct, you may want to use something like a vernier caliper or a steel rule. Anything you can use to measure the distance between the markings on the side of the swing arm to the centre line of the rear axle. The pin punch now comes in handy to pull the whole rear wheel set in towards the adjustment bolts. Simply insert the pin punch between the chain and the sprocket and then slowly turn the wheel around so the whole chain assembly binds up. This will give you greater accuracy while adjusting the chain, and make sure both sides of the axle are evenly pressed up against the adjustment blocks. Be sure to do this between each adjustment step on both sides of the swing arm. Once you have your desired chain tension, it's then time to reinsert the pin punch, bind up the chain assembly, and tighten the rear axle. Once the axle is tight, remove the pin punch and recheck the chain tension one last time. The last thing we need to do to finish the chain adjustment is to tighten up the chain adjusting assembly. To do this, we first place the 10mm spanner onto the 10mm adjusting bolt, followed by the 12mm spanner onto the locking nut. Then simply tighten. Of course, you probably want to not forget to do this on both sides. All that's left to do is to give the chain a quick run through of a couple of revolutions and just check the chain to make sure it's straight from the front to the back. Riding it through in second gear on the pit stand never hurts either.